What if I told you stupidity is not about low IQ? What if the real danger is not ignorance, but the refusal to think? Some people look confident, some speak loudly, some act powerful, but behind that noise, there is emptiness. Today, we are exposing 8 signs of a stupid person. And be careful, by the end of this video, you might recognize someone, or worse, yourself. In a world full of information, being foolish is a choice. We all make mistakes. We all lack knowledge in some areas. That's normal. But true stupidity is not about what you don't know. It's about your attitude toward learning, growth, and truth. A wise person can admit they are wrong. A foolish person would rather protect their ego than face reality. This video is not made to insult anyone. It is made to awaken minds. Because once you recognize these signs, you can remove them from your own life and grow stronger. They never admit they are wrong because their ego feels more important than the truth. A foolish person would rather damage a relationship than damage their pride. Even when the facts are clear, they twist the story. Even when the evidence is undeniable, they search for excuses. Instead of listening, they defend. Instead of reflecting, they react. To them, admitting a mistake feels like weakness, when in reality, it is strength. Their need to appear right blinds them from becoming better. And slowly, this habit isolates them because people grow tired of arguing with someone who refuses to see reality. Growth, however, begins with humility. The moment a person can calmly say, "I was wrong," their mind opens. Accountability builds respect. Maturity builds trust, and honesty builds stronger connections. No one is perfect, but wise people understand that mistakes are teachers, not enemies. If someone cannot admit fault, they remain trapped in the same patterns, repeating the same failures, living inside a prison built by their own ego. Real intelligence is not about always being right. It is about being willing to learn, even when it hurts. They talk more than they listen because they believe volume equals value. Wisdom stays quiet long enough to understand, but foolishness rushes to interrupt. A foolish person thinks constant speaking proves intelligence, when in reality, it often reveals insecurity. They do not listen to understand, they listen to reply. Their mind is busy preparing the next sentence instead of absorbing the present one. Because of this, they miss lessons, insights, and perspectives that could help them grow. They are so focused on being heard that they forget the power of hearing. True intelligence is calm, observant, and patient. It asks questions before giving opinions. It listens not just to words, but to tone, emotion, and meaning. The more a person speaks without understanding, the more they expose their ignorance. Silence, on the other hand, builds awareness. When you listen deeply, you gain knowledge, strengthen relationships, and respond with clarity instead of impulse. Wisdom knows that you learn more from listening than you ever will from dominating a conversation. They blame everyone else because protecting their ego feels easier than facing their flaws. Nothing is ever their fault. If they fail, someone else is responsible. If things go wrong, they quickly step into the role of the victim. They point fingers at circumstances, at colleagues, at family, at luck, anyone but themselves. This mindset may protect their pride in the moment, but it slowly weakens their character. When a person refuses to accept responsibility, they also refuse the power to change. Blame feels comfortable, but it keeps them stuck. Intelligent people think differently. They ask, "What could I have done better?" even when the situation is not entirely their fault. Responsibility builds strength, awareness, and progress. Foolish people create excuses, and excuses are the chains that keep them average. The moment you take ownership, you take control. Growth begins where excuses end. When you stop blaming the world, you start improving yourself, and that is where real power begins. They repeat the same mistakes because they refuse to pause and reflect. Making a mistake once is human. It's part of learning and growth, but repeating it again and again becomes a choice. A foolish person does not slow down to analyze what went wrong. Instead of thinking, they react. Instead of adjusting, they defend their behavior. Their emotions guide their decisions, and those same emotions lead them back into the same problems. Over time, the pattern becomes a cycle. Different day, same consequences. Growth requires reflection. It requires the courage to ask hard questions and face uncomfortable truths. Intelligent people study their failures, extract lessons, and change their approach. They understand that mistakes are only valuable if they teach something. Without reflection, there is no progress. Without awareness, there is no improvement. The difference between wisdom and foolishness is not perfection. It is the willingness to learn, adapt, and break the cycle. They follow the crowd blindly because thinking for themselves feels risky. They don't question what they hear, they simply repeat it. If everyone believes something, they believe it too. If everyone hates someone, they join the hate. Their opinions are borrowed, not built. They measure truth by popularity instead of logic. Deep down, they fear standing alone, because standing alone requires confidence and conviction. It's easier to blend in than to be different, easier to agree than to challenge. But intelligence requires courage, the courage to question common beliefs, the courage to pause and ask, is this actually true? The courage to think independently, even when it makes others uncomfortable. True wisdom doesn't chase approval, it seeks understanding. Sometimes that means walking alone, speaking carefully, and holding an unpopular opinion. But progress has always belonged to those who dared to think differently rather than blindly follow the noise. They get offended by truth because their ego hears correction as an insult. When truth feels like a personal attack, it is a sign that pride is in control. A foolish person cannot separate feedback from identity. Instead of listening and reflecting, they immediately become defensive. Instead of asking questions to understand, they react with anger or silence. To them, being corrected feels like being diminished, when in reality, correction is an opportunity, not a threat. Discomfort is often the doorway to growth. The truth may sting, but it also reveals blind spots. Intelligent people may not enjoy criticism, but they examine it. They ask themselves if there is something to learn. They understand that improvement requires humility. If you reject every uncomfortable truth, you reject every chance to evolve. Growth begins the moment you value progress more than your pride. They judge without understanding because assumptions feel faster than investigation. They form opinions without facts, build conclusions without context, and criticize situations they have never experienced. Instead of listening fully, they interrupt with certainty. Instead of asking questions, they rely on guesses. This shallow thinking creates a narrow world where everything is simplified and misunderstood. When someone believes they already know everything, they close the door to deeper insight. Wise people move differently. They pause and ask, what am I missing? They understand that every story has layers and every person has reasons. Curiosity expands perspective, while arrogance shrinks it. Intelligence is not about quick judgment, it is about careful observation. The moment you choose understanding over assumption, your world becomes wider, your thinking becomes sharper, and your relationships become stronger.
They care more about looking smart than being smart because their priority is image, not improvement. They want validation, not knowledge. So they pretend to understand topics they never studied, nodding confidently while lacking real depth. They speak with certainty even when they're unsure because they fear that admitting ignorance will lower their status. But this performance only creates a fragile intelligence, one that collapses under real scrutiny. When appearance becomes more important than learning, growth quietly stops. Saying, "I don't know," is not weakness, it is the beginning of wisdom. It opens the door to curiosity, questions, and real understanding. Pretending blocks growth because it closes that door. Humility unlocks it. Intelligent people are not afraid to admit gaps in their knowledge because they see those gaps as opportunities. The moment you value truth over ego, you stop performing intelligence and start building it. They react emotionally to everything because they never learn to pause between feeling and response. Every disagreement becomes a fight. Every criticism feels like disrespect. Every small inconvenience turns into a personal attack. Instead of managing their emotions, they are controlled by them. Anger speaks before logic. Pride responds before understanding. In these moments, intelligence takes a back seat because a mind overwhelmed by emotion cannot think clearly. Reaction replaces reflection, and conflict replaces communication. Emotional control is the foundation of clear thinking. Calmness creates space for reason. It allows you to analyze instead of explode, to respond instead of react. Intelligent people understand that feelings are natural, but decisions must be deliberate. When you master your emotions, you protect your relationships, your reputation, and your future. Calm thinking creates smart decisions. Emotional chaos creates foolish outcomes. The difference between wisdom and regret is often just a moment of self-control. They refuse to change because change threatens their comfort. The biggest sign of foolishness is resistance to growth. The world evolves, information evolves, opportunities evolve, but they remain the same, holding tightly to old habits, old thinking, and old pride. Instead of adapting, they complain. Instead of learning, they defend outdated views. They convince themselves that staying the same is strength, when in reality it is fear. Comfort becomes their cage, and pride becomes the lock. Growth requires flexibility. It requires the humility to admit that what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. Intelligent people update their mindset as they gain new knowledge. They are not ashamed to evolve. But the person who refuses to change slowly becomes irrelevant. While others move forward, they remain stuck in the past. And in a world that never stops moving, standing still is the fastest way to be left behind. Now pause for a moment. Don't think about others, think about yourself. Reflect honestly. Which of these signs have you shown recently? Awareness is the dividing line between wisdom and foolishness. One notices their patterns and grows. The other drifts blindly, repeating the same mistakes. So ask yourself something powerful. Are you truly growing each year, or are you simply getting older? Remember this, stupidity is not the absence of intelligence, it is the absence of self-awareness. Awareness opens the door to improvement. Reflection turns mistakes into lessons. Growth starts the moment you look inward with honesty. If you find this content valuable, please like this video, follow, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments section. Your support allows this channel to continue delivering powerful wisdom that helps you think, grow, and become better every day.